My husband stole nearly $500,000 from our joint account to fund his secret family, offshore accounts, shell companies, a mistress, and a baby I didn't know existed. He expected tears. He got an audit. This is a story of family drama, betrayal, and revenge, where justice didn't come from the courts, it came from math. I didn't scream when the bank teller whispered that our life savings were gone. Instead, I remembered that, as a forensic accountant, I knew exactly how to find money that didn't want to be found. My husband thought his offshore accounts were safe, but he was about to learn that stealing from me was a mathematically impossible crime. It started on a Tuesday, the kind of mundane Tuesday that usually blends into the gray fog of memory. I was standing in the lobby of First National, simply trying to transfer a deposit for the surprise anniversary trip I had been planning for months. Mark and I had been married for 12 years, 12 years of building a life, a home, and what I thought was a fortress of financial security. We had a joint savings account that we colloquially called the Freedom Fund. It was supposed to be for our retirement, or an emergency, or in this case, a luxury cruise through the Mediterranean to celebrate our survival as a couple. I handed my slip to the teller, a young woman named Sarah, whom I had chatted with countless times about the weather and her cat. She typed in the account number, smiled, and then stopped. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. The smile faltered, replaced by that slight, confused furrowing of the brow that I have seen 1,000 times in my line of work. It is the face people make when the numbers do not add up. "Is there a problem?" I asked, my voice casual, expecting a system error or a glitch. Sarah leaned closer to the screen, tapped a few more keys, and then looked at me with eyes wide with sudden, unprofessional pity. "Mrs. Sanchez," she whispered, ignoring the line of people behind me, "the balance is 0. Actually, it is technically negative due to a service fee for the wire transfer." I blinked. I actually laughed. "That is impossible," I said. "There should be $480,000 in there." Sarah turned the monitor toward me. It was a sea of red. A single outgoing wire transfer, executed 3 days prior, had drained the account down to the bone. $482,000 sent to an entity listed simply as Helios Holdings, LLC. I felt the blood drain from my face, rushing to my feet, making the marble floor feel like it was swaying. I gripped the counter. "Who authorized this?" I asked, my voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm register. "It was authorized by Mr. Sanchez," Sarah said softly. "He came in on Friday afternoon. He had the proper identification. He signed the wire forms." I thanked her. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't make a scene. I walked out of the bank, sat in my car, and stared at the steering wheel for 20 minutes. My mind, usually a chaotic storm of anxieties and to-do lists, went completely silent. Then, the machine turned on, the part of my brain that I use for my job, tracking embezzlement, finding hidden assets in divorce cases, exposing corporate fraud, woke up. Mark had made a mistake. He assumed that because I was his wife, I would react like a wife. He expected emotional devastation. He expected tears, pleading, and confusion. He forgot that he was married to Elizabeth Sanchez, a senior forensic accountant for one of the city's top firms. He forgot that I spent 40 hours a week tearing apart financial structures far more complex than anything a mid-level marketing executive could dream up. I went home. I cooked dinner, a roast chicken with root vegetables, his favorite. I needed him comfortable. I needed him to believe that nothing had changed. When he walked through the door at 6:30 p.m., looking handsome in his suit, loosening his tie with that weary sigh he always performed to show me how hard he worked, I kissed his cheek. "Rough day?" I asked. "The usual," he said, grabbing a beer from the fridge. "Clients are a nightmare. I feel like I'm herding cats." I watched him drink. I watched his throat move. I watched the man who had stolen nearly $500,000 from me, money I had contributed to equally, money we had saved by skipping vacations, driving old cars, and clipping coupons, stand in my kitchen and lie about his day. I didn't sleep that night. I waited until his breathing deepened into the heavy, rhythmic snore that usually drove me crazy. Tonight, it was music. It was the sound of opportunity. I slipped out of bed and went to my home office. I didn't need to hack the bank. I knew where the money went. Helios Holdings, LLC. That was the thread. Now, I just had to pull it. I started with public records. Helios Holdings was registered in Delaware, standard for anonymity, but the registered agent was a generic legal service, dead end for a novice, but not for me. I logged into my firm's proprietary databases, the ones we pay thousands of dollars a year to access. I cross-referenced the formation date of the LLC. It was created 6 months ago. 6 months! He had been planning this for half a year. I needed into his digital life. Mark was arrogant, and arrogance breeds sloppiness. He used a password manager, which is smart, but he kept the master password written in a physical notebook he kept in his sock drawer because he was terrified of getting locked out. I had seen it once while putting away laundry. I crept into the bedroom, retrieved the notebook, and retreated to my office. I logged into his email first. I didn't look for love letters. I looked for receipts. I set up filters for banking confirmations, wire transfers, and airline tickets. I found the confirmation for the wire transfer to Helios, but then I found the bank statements for Helios. The money hadn't stayed in Delaware. It had bounced. From Helios, it went to a shell company in the Cayman Islands called Blue Water Ventures. From Blue Water, it was dispersed into 2 streams. One stream went into a high-yield investment account. The other stream, a steady trickle of $5,000 a month, was going to a bank account in a neighboring city. I traced the recipient of the monthly payments. The account belonged to a woman named Vanessa Tate. I pulled her social media. It was wide open. Vanessa was 24. She was a yoga instructor. She was beautiful in that effortless, filtered way. And there, in a photo posted 3 weeks ago, was Mark. He wasn't just standing next to her. He was holding a baby. The caption read, "Daddy's here for the weekend. So grateful for this little family." The air left my lungs. It wasn't just greed. It wasn't a gambling addiction or a bad investment. It was a second life. He had drained our life savings not to run away, but to fund a parallel existence. He was playing house with a woman half my age and a child I didn't know existed, using the money I had earned working 60-hour weeks during tax season. I looked at the dates. The baby looked to be about a year old. The affair had been going on for at least 2 years. The LLC was set up 6 months ago, likely when the expenses started getting too high to hide on his credit cards. He stole our nest egg to secure their future, leaving me with a mortgage and a lie. I sat in the dark, the glow of the monitor illuminating the tears finally streaming down my face. I cried for exactly 10 minutes. I checked the clock. At 3:15 a.m., I wiped my face and turned the emotional switch off. Now it was time for the audit. Mark had made a fatal calculation. He moved the money to the Caymans thinking it was out of U.S. jurisdiction. He thought that if I divorced him, I'd have to spend years and tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees to maybe see a fraction of it. He was betting on me giving up, but he had forgotten something from 5 years ago. 5 years ago, Mark had gone in for back surgery. It was a routine procedure, but he was terrified of anesthesia. He had insisted we sign durable general powers of attorney for each other, granting us full, unrestricted access to act on each other's behalf in all financial and legal matters. He wanted to make sure I could pay the bills if he was in a coma. After the surgery, he recovered quickly. We filed the papers away in the fireproof box in the closet. He never revoked it. I pulled the document from the box. It was valid. It gave me the legal authority to access, transfer, and manage any assets in his name. Technically, the offshore accounts were in the name of the LLC, but the LLC was single member, owned by him. With the power of attorney, I was him. But I couldn't just take the money back. If I transferred it back to our joint account and then we divorced, he would still be entitled to half of it as marital assets. He would still win. He would get to keep Vanessa, the baby, and $240,000 of my hard work. No, I needed a zero balance. I needed a result that was legally defensible but financially terminal for him. I spent the next 3 days in a fugue state of planning. I went to work, I smiled at colleagues, I came home, I kissed my cheating husband, and then I worked on his destruction. I contacted the bank in the Caymans, I used the power of attorney, scanned and notarized. I have a notary friend who owes me a favor and didn't ask questions about the timestamp, to gain administrative access to the Blue Water Ventures account. They hesitated, but the documentation was ironclad. Mark had used his real passport to open the account, another sloppy move. Once they verified my identity as his legal proxy, they gave me the keys to the kingdom. I saw it all. The $482,000 was sitting there, looking smug. He hadn't invested it in anything risky yet. He was just parking it, hiding it until he could initiate the divorce on his terms. He probably planned to leave me in a month or two, crying poverty, claiming bad investments lost our savings, and then sail off into the sunset with Vanessa. I had to move fast. If he checked the account or if Vanessa asked for more money, he would see me lurking. I created a new bank account in my name only, at a completely different bank, but transferring the money there would look like theft in a divorce court. I needed a destination that a judge would look at and say, well, that's gone, and morally, I can't falter. I remembered a conversation Mark and I had years ago in front of friends where he pompously declared that if we ever made it big, we would donate a significant portion to the local women's shelter, Safe Harbor. He wanted to look like a philanthropist. He loved the applause. I decided to help him fulfill that pledge. On Friday morning, exactly 1 week after I discovered the theft, I took the day off work. I sat in my kitchen with a pot of coffee and my laptop. Step 1. I liquidated the high-yield holding in the Cayman account. Step 2. I transferred the entirety of the funds, $482,156.42, back to the U.S., but not to our joint account. I routed it through a pass-through account I controlled. Step 3. I went to the Safe Harbor Women's Shelter website. I called their director. I told her that my husband and I wished to make an anonymous donation to fund their new wing for victims of domestic financial abuse. The irony was delicious, sweet like nectar. The director was in tears. She asked if I was sure. I told her I had never been more sure of anything in my life. I wired the money, all of it, every single cent that he had stolen from our future. I watched the screen as the transfer finalized. The balance in the Cayman account read $0.00. The balance in the Helios LLC account was $0.00. The balance in our joint savings was still negative. I wasn't done. I drafted the divorce petition myself. I cited adultery and dissipation of marital assets. I attached the forensic trail I had compiled, the flow of funds, the shell companies, the payments to Vanessa Tate, the photos of the child. I printed out the donation receipt to the Safe Harbor Shelter, listed as a joint donation by Mark and Elizabeth Sanchez. I packed his bags. I didn't pack them nicely. I threw his suits, his shoes, his precious golf clubs into garbage bags. I piled them on the front porch. I changed the locks on the house. Then I waited for him to come home. He arrived at 6:15 p.m. He saw the garbage bags on the porch and frowned. He probably thought I was doing a deep clean or donating old clothes. He tried his key in the lock. It didn't turn. He rang the doorbell, confused. I opened the door. I was dressed in my best suit, holding a glass of wine. I didn't let him in. "What's going on? Why is my stuff outside? Why doesn't my key work?" he asked, looking more annoyed than worried. I handed him a large manila envelope. "You're being served, Mark," I said. He laughed, a short, incredulous bark. "Served? For what?" Liz, if this is about me missing dinner last night. Open it, I said. He tore open the envelope. He saw the divorce papers. He rolled his eyes. Then he saw the bank transfer records. His face went pale. He flipped the page. He saw the Cayman account printout. His hands started to shake. You hacked me, he whispered. That's illegal. You can't use this. I smiled. Actually, I didn't hack you. I used the power of attorney you gave me in 2019. I acted as your legal representative. He scrambled for his phone, frantically tapping the screen. He was checking the balance. I watched the realization hit him like a physical blow. He looked up at me, eyes bulging, sweat instantly beading on his forehead. Where is it? Where is the money, Elizabeth? I pointed to the last page in his hand, the donation receipt. He looked at it. He read the amount. He read the recipient. He made a noise I had never heard a human make before, a strangled, high-pitched squeak of absolute despair. You gave it away? You gave away $500,000? I corrected him. We gave it away, Mark. You always said you wanted to be a philanthropist. I just helped you achieve your dream. It's for the new wing at the shelter. They're going to put a plaque up with your name on it, the Mark Sanchez Wing for Financial Justice. He fell to his knees, literally dropped to the concrete porch. You can't do that. That was my money. That was our money, I interrupted, my voice sharpening. And since you decided to steal it to fund your mistress and your secret baby, I decided, but neither of us gets it. It's gone, Mark. It is irrevocable. You have a zero balance. You have no savings. You have no offshore nest egg. And since I'm keeping the house because you dissipated our assets, you have nowhere to live. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. But Vanessa, I promised her. I know, I said, cold as ice. I'm sure she'll be very understanding when you tell her you're broke. I stepped back and started to close the door. Liz, he screamed, scrambling up. Liz, please, we can fix this. It was a mistake. The only mistake, I said through the narrowing crack of the door, was thinking you could outsmart a woman who does this for a living. I slammed the door and locked the deadbolt. I listened to him pounding on the wood, screaming, crying, begging. I listened for a while, and then I went into the kitchen and poured myself another glass of wine. The divorce was brutal, but short. Mark tried to argue that I had maliciously wasted marital assets. My lawyer, a shark I had worked with on many cases, countered that Mark had already committed theft and fraud by moving the funds offshore to hide them, and that my action was a charitable donation made with legal authority, acting as him. The judge, a woman who had seen her fair share of scumbag husbands, was not sympathetic to Mark. Because the money was gone to a registered charity, the court couldn't order me to pay him back money I didn't have. The assets were dissipated, yes, but his initial theft was the catalyst. The judge ruled that since Mark had intended to defraud me, his claim to the equitable distribution of the home was forfeited to satisfy the debt he created. I got the house. I got my pension. I kept my car. Mark got the debt. He had racked up credit card bills setting up the apartment for Vanessa, expecting the offshore money to pay them off. Now he had nothing. The fallout was public and humiliating. In our small community, news travels fast. The shelter announced the generous donation in the local paper, thanking Mark and Elizabeth Sanchez. People came up to him in the street to shake his hand, praising his generosity. He had to smile and nod, dying inside, because admitting the truth, that his wife stole the money back from his secret affair fund, would destroy his reputation completely. He was trapped in a prison of false virtue. Vanessa didn't stick around. It turns out her love for Mark was heavily subsidized by the lifestyle he promised. Once the rent checks bounced and he moved into a dingy studio apartment, she took the baby and moved back in with her parents in another state. I feel sorry for the child. I do. But I set up a small educational trust for the kid using my own post-divorce money that Mark doesn't know about. The kid shouldn't suffer because his father is a moron. As for me, I'm rebuilding. It's hard starting over with your savings drained, even if it was by your own hand. But I have my job, I have my dignity, and I have the satisfaction of knowing that somewhere in a women's shelter downtown, there are beds and warm meals paid for by the arrogance of a cheating husband. I saw Mark the other day at the grocery store. He looked 10 years older. He was buying ramen noodles and generic beer. He saw me, and for a second, I saw that old spark of entitlement flare up in his eyes, like he wanted to march over and demand an apology. But then he looked at my cart, full of fresh produce, a nice bottle of wine, and a birthday cake for myself, and he remembered. He remembered the math. He remembered that I am the one who balances the books, and he turned his cart around and walked away. I paid for my groceries and walked out into the sunshine. The account balance was 0, but for the first time in years, I felt like I had everything. But let me back up, because I skipped over the details of exactly how I broke him, and I think you all deserve to know the forensic precision of it. It wasn't just finding the money, it was the psychological dismantling of his safety net. When I found the folder on his laptop labeled Project H, I expected to find business plans. Instead, I found a spreadsheet, a budget. He had projected his life with Vanessa for the next 20 years. He had allocated funds for a house in a different state, for a new car for her, for private school for the child, and in the column for current liabilities, he had listed Elizabeth. He had allocated $20,000 for my settlement. He planned to leave me with 20 grand out of merely $500,000. That was the moment I stopped feeling any lingering loyalty. That was the moment I decided that just taking the money back wasn't enough. I dug deeper into the metadata of his files. I found his search history, how to hide assets in divorce, non-extradition countries for banking, cost of living in Costa Rica. He was a cliché wrapped in a stereotype. The night I transferred the money, I also did something else. I logged into his LinkedIn. I didn't post anything publicly. Instead, I adjusted his settings. I turned off the notifications. Then I forwarded his work emails to a folder he rarely checked. Why? Because I knew that when the bomb dropped, he would be too distracted to manage his actual job. And I was right. In the week following the confrontation, while he was scrambling to find a lawyer who would take his case without a retainer, he missed 3 major client deadlines. I knew this because I'm friends with his assistant, a sweet girl named Chloe who always hated how he talked down to her. I took Chloe out for coffee 2 days after I served him. I didn't tell her everything, but I told her that Mark was going through a personal crisis involving a gambling addiction and that she should probably protect herself. Chloe, being smart, reported his erratic behavior to HR before he could drag her down with him. When he finally showed up to work, disheveled and smelling of panic, he was met with a performance review. He was fired a month later. So not only did I bankrupt him, I inadvertently, maybe a little intentionally, sabotaged his career. But the sweetest part? The power of attorney. I mentioned it earlier, but I didn't explain the full scope of it. It allowed me to make medical decisions too. Obviously, I didn't do anything drastic there, but I did use it to cancel his premium health insurance policy and switch him to the absolute bare minimum state-required plan to save money for the household just days before I served him. Petty? Yes. Illegal? No, I was acting as his financial proxy to reduce expenses. I remember the mediation session during the divorce. We sat across a long mahogany table. Mark looked like a ghost. His lawyer was a tired-looking man who clearly hadn't been paid up front. My lawyer laid out the facts. Mr. Sanchez dissipated $482,000 of marital funds. Mrs. Sanchez, acting under valid power of attorney, recovered those funds and donated them to a 501c3 charity. The funds are gone. However, since the dissipation was initiated by Mr. Sanchez's fraudulent transfer to an offshore shell company, the court views the loss as his liability. Mark slammed his hand on the table. She gave it away out of spite. That's not a valid financial decision. I looked him dead in the eye. Mark, you named the shell company Helios, the sun. You wanted to fly too close to the sun. I just let gravity do the rest. It's vindictive waste, he shouted. It's tax deductible, I replied calmly. I made sure to file the donation under the current tax year. You'll actually get a massive write-off. You're welcome. His lawyer put a hand on Mark's arm to silence him. The lawyer knew. He knew they had no moves. If they went to trial, the evidence of the affair, the child, and the premeditated theft would be public record. Mark's reputation in the business community would be obliterated. He would never work in this town again. We'll settle, the lawyer said. Mark looked at him, betrayed. With what? I have nothing. Exactly, I said. You have nothing, and you will walk away with nothing. You will sign over the deed to the house. You will sign over your claim to my 401k, and we will call it even. Even? Mark sputtered. You ruined my life. You ruined your own life, Mark, I said, gathering my files. I just balanced the ledger. He signed. He cried while he did it, but he signed. Now, 6 months later, I walk past the safe harbor shelter on my way to work sometimes. They finished the new wing. It's beautiful. Brick and glass with a playground for the kids. I haven't gone inside. I don't need to. I know that my money, our money, is keeping people warm. Sometimes I wonder if I went too far. Was it too cruel to leave him destitute? I think about the years of lies, the way he looked me in the eye and said we couldn't afford a new furnace, while he was paying rent for an apartment across town. The way he let me worry about our retirement, while he was building a golden parachute for himself. And then I think about the math. Betrayal is a subtraction. It takes away trust, security, and love. Revenge, in this case, was simply division. I divided his assets by 0. And as any mathematician will tell you, the result is undefined. It is chaos. He lives in that chaos now. I live in the black. I kept the notebook, the one with his passwords. I don't use it anymore, but I keep it in my desk drawer. A reminder. It reminds me that even the smartest men make stupid mistakes when they think women aren't paying attention. He thought I was just a wife. He thought I was just an accountant. He forgot that forensic accounting is just another word for autopsy. I didn't just find the money. I dissected his life to find the cause of death of our marriage, and the cause of death was him. So, to anyone out there suspecting their partner is hiding something, trust your gut, but more importantly, check the bank statements. Look for the outliers. Look for the recurring payments that don't make sense. And if you find them, don't scream, don't fight. Calculate. Because the only thing more satisfying than a woman scorned is a woman with a spreadsheet and a valid power of attorney. I am Elizabeth Sanchez. I am single. I am brokish, but I am the winner. And Mark is just a line item I deleted. If you stayed until the end, you already know. Some people don't get forgiven, they get audited. If you believe betrayal deserves consequences, hit like and subscribe. I share revenge and justice stories where the truth is always balanced.